Good morning and welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me at MarketSite, we have Kinahan. He's the Chief Market Strategist over at TD Ameritrade, and we are here to discuss the Investor Movement Index results for November. Great to have you.
Always a
in
pleasure
studio,
to be with you, Jill.
as always. November, IMX took a little bit of a hit, just like the markets all around. Not too much of a surprise. Lowest levels, I believe, since May 2018.
Yep.
What did you get out of the report?
What I got out of the report is that people are still looking for stocks to buy, but they have moved a lot more of their money toward fixed income, which, to your point, to start the show, wasn't completely surprising given sort of the volatile environment that we exist in right now. And you know, in my opinion, and I think many others, will continue until we have some sort of a tariff resolution one way or the other in more certainty.
Right, because, you know, a lot of these trade wars are impacting the stocks that have been highly tradable for TD clients, tech being one of them. Although it's interesting, you did see some tech names within the top buys.
Apple was still one people that they have trust in that story long term. They still believe in the stock. Amazon, which got beaten up and then had a little bit of pop at the beginning of this month, again, one that was bought. Netflix. So it's kind of interesting that some of the FANG stocks still being popular to buy. And then one that I think people are still trying to figure out the story, but we saw some buyers, was GE. I think the thought there being a little bit of, okay, they still have a lot of businesses, they still have some core value, and it's a $7 stock. So, you know, maybe it's an inexpensive way to play a comeback for many, many people.
All right, now what about some of the top sells?
Yeah, so top sells are really interesting because if I look back a few months ago, these were the stocks that were top buys. Tesla, which has had a very nice rally, you know, one of the stocks that's sort of defying the odds. If you look what happened there in November, continued to rally nicely, so people took some profits there. Procter & Gamble, Starbucks, again, stocks they bought a couple of months ago that were being beaten up, starting to rally, people taking profits. So I think a little bit of the message being, take some profits where I can, try and figure out what I can invest in, equity-wise, and maybe some fixed income more than people have in the past. I think the real thing that's going on in the market right now, Jill, overall, is confusion. No one's quite sure what's the sector to lead us higher, and so many of the safety plays are what people are looking for right now and things that they've had success with.
Let's talk a little bit of macro, because when I was with you guys in Chicago the 2 days before Thanksgiving, we were talking, I think there was a 600 decline day in the Dow when we were there as well, that we were surprised by the way the VIX was reacting. It wasn't at levels that you would expect that kind of sell-off to necessarily portray, but looking back over the past couple of weeks, it's been even further of a drop than what we saw, you know, around Thanksgiving.
Yeah, well, what's interesting to me is how orderly this sell-off has been. We've seen very little panic throughout it. Those who are bearish will point to that and say that that's a signal that we can continue to go lower, by the way. But it's really interesting how orderly this sell-off has been. Everything has sort of been in line. You know, people are coming for the safety of bonds in it, but again, I think everyone's looking around saying, what's the stability play? What's the thing that can lead us back higher? We're still trying to figure that out. You know, it's interesting that Procter & Gamble was a sale, because if you look at some of the consumer staples, it's actually where people have turned, where you tend to get consistent earnings and consistent dividends. But again, I also understand why people in a market like this are looking to say, where can I take profits and take some risk off the table?
Right, and it feels like this is going to be, you know, for the first quarter of 2019, I don't see anything necessarily changing that's going to alleviate some of this confusion.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jill, because when I look right now and I say, okay, what's the biggest story? The biggest story is still the tariff of overhangs. CEOs, if you look at last quarter, many of them started to give their expectations for earnings a little bit lower because there's a lot of uncertainty right now. They're not, if you're a CEO, you're not going to get punished for giving lower expectations. You are going to get punished if you give high expectations and you don't meet them. So I think that that's one of it. And in times of uncertainty, caution being a smart move by the CEOs. And so with that, until this tariff situation is more resolved, I think it's going to continue to weigh on expectations and weigh on really decision making, because people don't want to commit one way or the other until they have more certainty. Once you know the rules of the game, you can play the game. Right now, nobody knows what the rules of the game are.
Right. Well, I will say that one bright spot certainly is consumer, and I'm going to talk about this with Oliver later on your show. What retail stocks are doing are exclusive of what's happening with consumer spend and the economy. There still are some bright spots.
There absolutely are, and I don't want to paint all gloom and doom. And if you look at the Barron's article this week on Caterpillar, painting perhaps a bright spot that some of this may be getting a little bit overdone also. But you're 100% right. If you look at Black Friday, you look at Cyber Monday, those were two very good days. We seem to have a healthy consumer heading into the holiday season overall. So wouldn't it be very odd if the retailers are sort of the ones that save us? Certainly not anything that any one of us would expect.
All right, JJ, thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Jill.
And thank you for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.